Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hello, everybody.
So we are joined live right now. We just fired up. We're doing a little bitty video here to start you guys off, and then we'll share the video. Tonight's episode is pre-recorded.
Yep. But we are all going to be in the chats, including Russell.
And
Hello.
this guy really doesn't need any introduction here because we have been blasting your name on our network for the last week.
Yes, we have.
So
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
And Russell is the author of the book Naming Jack the Ripper. And his research into this subject is the reason we're having the show tonight. And we want to thank him so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So now, Russell, you may have seen a little video I sent you just before that Crystal had shared. The Wendy's, we never got a chance to explain this to you. We started eating Wendy's chicken nuggets on our show a few years ago.
No, when we started.
When we first started back in October. And it kind of went viral that we eat chicken nuggets on our show. So that's
And everybody proud of Scotty too. He's the one that brought the chicken nuggets with us.
Everybody.
And it even got to the point where there was a small town in Utah. Their Wendy's actually put "Thank you, 13th Dimension" on their sign for the whole city to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I saw that, my jaw was down to here. I could not believe it.
So
Wow.
I kind of came up with a little joke about that. Actually, I always say from Wayne's World, I always say we bow to no corporate sponsors.
Russell, I just want to say, like Tim said, thank you so much for coming on. Your research and everything you did and being on the show was just absolutely amazing. And by far, for myself, one of the most emotional podcasts I've ever done. I mean, I was just completely in awe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I watched it Monday, and I just could not believe everything that I was seeing. I was speechless. It was an amazing interview, and I'm really proud of you guys.
Thank you,
Hey,
brother.
Jeremy, you got the call when we ended the interview, and we called you, and we're like, Jeremy, oh my God, you got to hear this.
Voices were so shook up, and we were on the phone for, I don't know, maybe about an hour. And even at the end of that hour, Tim was saying he was still completely shaken from the whole thing.
Yeah, I never expected to see what we saw. We have not released what the exclusive material is yet, so we were really wanting that to be a wow factor for the show tonight. So, which since I guess it's going to be airing here in just 9 minutes. Russell, do you want to explain to everybody what the exclusive material is?
Well, for the first time ever, I reveal on your show this shawl that was taken from the fourth Ripper murder scene. And it was from this shawl I managed to connect the dates of why the murder that the world knows as Jack the Ripper went out and murdered on those specific dates. More importantly, we traced the blood that was found on the shawl to the descendants of the fourth murder victim. So we matched the DNA from the descendants with the blood on the shawl, so we know the shawl was at the murder scene. We then further analysed it to find out that it wasn't in her possession or under her ownership, and then we realised the shawl was left there, and the person who took it there was the man the world knows as Jack the Ripper, and he left evidence on there, which will come out in your show, which I show for the first time ever. All of this evidence that we used and analysed, it took decades to do it, 4 years in the labs, to actually conclusively name the murderer the world knows as Jack the Ripper.
And thank you so much for showing it on our show. That's huge. It's a big honor for us.
So real quick, just so we can make a couple announcements, I want to show this real fast.
Yes, George. We've
George,
all seen it. George is a part of the paranormal community. We're over here. We're all kind of friends with him. He was re-diagnosed with cancer a couple weeks ago, and he went in for surgery today. And from what I've seen online, they were able to remove all of his cancer today. So, George,
Thank
you're
you,
in our
God.
thoughts and our prayers
and
always.
Absolutely, George.
we love you and we're behind you 100%. Anything you need, you let us know.
Yes,
Yeah.
please do, brother.
And then, Jeremy, you had another one?
I did.
I think
Oh yes. I'm still sharing the crap out of this thing. Not only was George going through his ordeal, but also Lindia Johnson is also diagnosed with cancer, and she's battling it out right now. So we want to send our support and love to her as well.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So guys, I mean, we're just a few minutes away from this awesome recording that I'm still like this, Russell. I still can't stop shaking because I love this interview so much. I believe I
Oh,
told
yeah.
you I've interviewed thousands of celebrities. I've interviewed Jimmy Buffett. I've interviewed Prince. I've interviewed all these people. Yes, I know, Scott. I've interviewed your favorite singer of all time.
Well,
It was a phone interview, if that makes you feel better. I didn't get to meet him in person. But this is by far my favorite interview I've ever done. It really is. And I want to say that when I first reached out to you, there were so many people that we were reaching out to be on the show, celebrities and such, and different people. And you responded back to me right away that you would absolutely do this. I cannot thank you enough for
In
all you've
October,
done.
we've waited months.
Yes, we've waited months for this to come out. So
And it just so happens to be that the day of the interview, I was going to be 4 states over. I'm like, oh, well, okay.
And I said, Jeremy, you go. I got Russell. You go.
Yeah. But in the end, I mean, the whole thing is totally worth it. When I watched the interview, it just blew me away. It really did.
And tonight's show, guys, while we do focus on Jack the Ripper and we talk about Jack the Ripper, tonight's show is dedicated to the victims.
Yes.
The 5 that we know for sure. I know that there's conspiracies floating around about other victims as well. So any victim of Jack the Ripper, that's what this episode's for.
Yes.
And like I said, the man that's with us right now and the man that's in the interview, he's absolutely amazing, guys. And if you guys get the chance, please go out, get his book and read it, because this guy, Russell, is absolutely, he's brilliant. And you guys, I'm in shock and awe right now. So, I mean, just, you know, I'm speechless for once.
Now
That
we put him speechless.
well, I actually get there.
for those of you who are joining us for the first time ever, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
We love it that you guys have decided to come watch our show. But there are many other shows on this network as well, so I encourage you to go check them out.
Absolutely.
There will be 2 shows following this one here. First is What the Frick with Emily Menthouse. In fact, Tim and Crystal are going to be guests on her show right after this one.
Yeah, we'll be on talking about my favorite subject, Vlad the Impaler. So,
And then the show after that is I don't remember what the name of the show is, but it is hosted by Bishop James Long.
Yes.
so yeah. And then we didn't really film an after part to the show. We wanted to say also that next week's show we'll have our very own Scott Wilson as our guest.
Mm-hmm.
And he will be talking about some other known serial killers from right here in the United States.
Absolutely.
We want to reiterate again too, the Tonight Show, it was pre-recorded. We're live now.
Yep.
Right here in 2 minutes. And that all of us will be available in the comments, including Russell. We want to thank you so much for staying up.
Yes.
That was the reason why we wanted to do it pre-recorded, because it's so late over there. We know you're looking at what, almost 1 o'clock in the morning there, right?
It's only midnight.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you're not as far behind us.
But I knew that it would be late for you, and I didn't want you to have to stay up. I'm so glad you are up, because we are just more than ecstatic to have you with us right now.
Thank you.
And you guys can post your comments, questions, anything you want in the chats. We're all going to be watching it. Russell can help answer, obviously, what we can't, because you've done a lot more work than what we have.
Now, for those of you who don't know, this guy has put in well over a decade of work into this thing. And in my opinion, it's paid off.
Absolutely.
All right, Jeremy, I think that's your cue. We're a minute out. Let's get it rolling.
Yes, it is. So I am going to go ahead and take everybody off the stream. And then I am going to do a screen share to play the video file. And then that'll be it.
All right. We'll see you guys next week, and we'll be in the chats tonight.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. We love all of you.
Thank you again, Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
look
you,
forward-
Russell. Good Lord. Sorry.
Going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
This isn't amazing. This is epic.
Yeah, this is
This
by
is
far.
By far one of the coolest guests we've ever had on the show. By far one of the absolute coolest topics.
But we've had some amazing guests, and I want you all to know that. Like, we're not taking anything from any of you.
Absolutely. But this guy,
Yeah, but
this guy kind of is the coup de grace for a subject that is kind of close for all of us.
Look at my hair.
You guys have seen all the theories. You've watched the documentaries. Tonight, we are going to name Jack the Ripper.
Like, this is. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I am a huge serial killer person, and so to be able to have this discussion, and I mean, it's just so overwhelming. I mean, I was already crying off camera, you know. So, I mean,
This is one of our favorite topics,
yeah.
and we're going to bring this guy on right now. His name is Russell Edwards. He's from the UK. He wrote the book,
he's
and
the man.
he has the famous shawl. Hi, Russell.
Hi, Russell.
Hi, guys. Hi.
How you doing?
First of all, we want to say what an honor it is to have you on our show.
Yes, absolutely.
We are excited to bring your story to the public and to our fans, and we're excited to get all this out there and hopefully help you sell some more books, because if you haven't read this book, you absolutely need to.
Definitely.
Absolutely. It's an
Yeah.
amazing book. Absolutely amazing.
And we want to get into this, but we want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, where you're from and how you ended up naming Jack the Ripper.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you took an interest in my story. Well, I'm originally from Merseyside, so it's called the Wirral, which is just over the River Mersey to Liverpool. So we all have the same, very similar accents. So Liverpool, the Beatles. You know, I was born in the '60s, so a child of the '60s, and I went down south to London in 1989 was when I went. I actually went down south in '88, but went to London in 1989. And I made a very good friendship very, very quickly. His name's Andrew, and he lived in Bethnal Green. And so we'd used to go around to his house and we'd study. And at late night studies, what we would do is we go to a very famous bagel shop, which is in Brick Lane. Now, Bethnal Green, for those guys that don't know, is in the East End of London. And Brick Lane is sort of in the heart of the East End. So you're looking at the fringe of the city. So it's right on the edge of the city of London, if you like. And of course, bagels, cream cheese bagels and a cup of tea, still just as cheap. Well, not as cheap. You're like 60 pence. So it's like, not even a dollar, and you can feed yourself, and that's what we used to live on. And I fell in love with East End. It definitely has this. You know what? It's more in the night time, but it has this. For 300 years, it's been the main area for immigration into London. So we've had the French in the 18th century, we've had the Jewish contingent in the 19th century, and now the 20th century is more Bangladeshi. But it feels like a magnet. You can feel something there. That's the best way I can say. And of course, I was just like one of the millions of people that did that. Now I love curries. So there's Brick Lane is very famous, called the Curry Mile. So there's quite a lot of curry houses, and that's where we'd spend most of our weekends, definitely Friday, Saturday nights. And all through the 90s, I was very successful with a very good computer company, more to do with being in the right place at the right time. But all my corporate clients, they had to see the flavour of the East End, so that's where I would take them. And then when that film From Hell came out, I remember it literally, Jack the Ripper film. Oh well, it's in the winter. Let's go and see it. And I was so bowled over by the film. And again, it was a case of, well, Jack the Ripper, is this a mystery? Is this a myth? Is this real? So I went on a Ripper tour on the Saturday and discovered, yes, it is real. But more importantly, all the murders are virtually where I'd been for the previous 11 years. So I'd walk past these murder scenes not knowing it had anything to do with Jack the Ripper. And I was quite overwhelmed with that. And again, just like you guys, I'd had an interest in serial killers. I grew up in the 70s. So over your side of the water, you have people like Ted Bundy. You had later on was Jeffrey Dahmer, but that, the John Wayne Gacy, that sort of, that era. And again, over in the UK, we had Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. And then in the early 80s, we had a guy called Dennis Nilsen, again in London. So it wasn't unfamiliar territory for me. So on the Monday, after watching the film on the Friday, going on a Ripper tour on the Saturday, on the Monday I called Scotland Yard and asked where could I access. Are there any files I could access? And there are. It's past the 100-year rule. Because in the UK, all documents are held for 100 years and then they're made public. So this was like 2000, 2001. So I accessed all the case files down in the London Archives in Kew. So that's how it started for me.
That's awesome. That Johnny Depp movie brought you into the Ripper legend.
And just going on a Ripper tour. I mean, that's something I've always wanted to do, go over there and go look at that tour and go on that tour and just see all the different places where Jack the Ripper had committed these crimes, man. And yeah, I mean,
it's definitely on all of our bucket lists if we're ever there.
I'm going.
Yeah, we will definitely give you a call. You can come and give us a tour.
Yeah. One of the significant things about the I would say the bog standard tourist tour, for what I do, I obviously know where he lived at the time of the murders, a completely different slant on the story, because rather than sensationalizing the name Jack the Ripper, you need to know about these people, the victims. These were human beings that were slaughtered, and there's no real, even though my name is in there because I named this murderer, it was to really try and put this story to bed, to try and get justice for these victims. I do know lots of the families, and even though it's three, great grandparents, it still affects them even today. Says, "Oh, do you know my, Catherine Eddowes is one, obviously more significant to me because of this my story." But when you speak to the family, nobody deserves to be butchered and left in the air, if you like, with no justice.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. We actually have a paranormal investigation team as well called Things. So we do deal with the paranormal quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where, you have all these ghost stories. We've all watched the shows, like over there, the big show was Most Haunted, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when they went on the Ripper tour, the Hunt for Jack the Ripper, in one of their episodes, to see if they could find, something, any paranormal evidence of Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
But nobody ever thinks about, everybody always, like you said, everybody always focuses on Jack because it's the world's oldest and biggest whodunit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everybody always focuses on Jack himself, and nobody ever gives particular interest really to the victims.
Yep.
And that was one of the things I loved about your book, was that you really brought out a real empathy and sympathy for the victims.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And I loved that angle of it because it to me, it was one of those things where it just really tied the location, the horrible atrocities, and what these people were actually going through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It kind of tied it all together.
Yeah.
And in the book, you referenced how you can relate to the Ripper victims. Can you explain a little bit about how you feel connected to the victims?
Yeah. Again, mainly for me, it's Catherine Eddowes because the shawl that I own, it was found at her murder scene. But back when I went down south, I actually went down south in 1988, and I'd lost everything. I sort of, I bought my first house when I was 20. I had my own business, and I had 7 people work for me when I was 19. Then by the time I was 22, I had my third. I signed on with, this, what he's called the dole, or unemployment benefit. And I'm driving around in flash cars, and I lost it all. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. And so I went down south with, all I had was a very battered old red van that was just lucky to get me down there at £130 and a suitcase and a map. And within a week that had all gone. The van got towed away. So I was homeless, properly homeless, for about 6 weeks. And in that time, I got scabies, which is it's like measles, but for those of you that don't, it's like little worms are growing. It was appalling. So I know what it's like to be at the very, very. And when I read these, as I turned my life around, I was very lucky with that as well. But so I know what it was like. I know what it's like to starve. I know what it's like, the shame. You don't feel part of this world that seems to be above you. It seems to pass you by. I did experience the kindness of strangers myself, where thankfully for me, I had the wherewithal not to become an alcoholic, not to fall into alcoholism like those guys did. Because you've got to remember, those 5 victims, that except for the last one, Mary Kelly, they were parents, they were married, they had lives, and they fell from grace into selling their bodies for 4 pennies for either one night's bed in a shared house called the Doss House, or for some food. And they would, it wasn't a case of that's all they did. If they could, in the morning, if they could find a day job, if you like, they would do that. But invariably, they were so drunk and couldn't face the world really, that they just turned to drink. And the easiest way was just to sell the bodies, which is what they ended up doing.
Oh, we have our mic on.
We did have our mic on. One.
Deny or confirm, but the fact is, it was my auntie that said it to me and my mum, and I was only little at the time, and that's what stuck into my mind. That, you know, how close can you be? That you even am descended from prostitutes. You think, well, you know, it's quite a profound. When you think about that, that's quite a profound thing to consider, you know, in itself. So that's what really, you know, brought me into that area. You know, it's you know, now it's very trendy. The houses are millions and millions of pounds, but when I first went, it wasn't like that at all. They were very derelict slums. And so if you go back to, you know, 1888, when all of this happened, mass Jewish influx, you know, and this was the worst, most impoverished part of London. And these poor women, you know, literally couldn't really come to terms with life. So all they could do was forced to sell the only thing they had, which was their body, you know. So that's what really, really got it for me. And I've held on to that ever since. But again, you know, I've had experiences directly linked to what they went, except for the obviously selling my body. I don't think anyone would have it, to be honest. But that's, you know, how I related to them.
Yeah, here in the States, it's funny how quick we are to judge sometimes. And I don't know if it's just the way our culture is here, but you know, what we sometimes fail to remember are sometimes people are in a position where they have no other choice.
Yeah, it's survival mode. You know,
Yeah.
you do what it takes to provide for your family, and that's, in a sense, that's what these ladies did. They did what it takes to provide for
Themselves and anyone they have with them.
Yeah, that's right.
And their story deserves to be heard, which is why I'm so glad you wrote the book.
Absolutely. And you know, like you guys said, a lot of times when you hear a book or a movie or whatever, it's based on Jack himself and not the victims. And that's why this book is so brilliantly written, because you took the time to talk about the victims, you know, and that's what needed to be heard.
Yeah. You know, I do know lots more about the victims that I couldn't put into the book. But you know, like for example, going back to Catherine Eddowes, who was the fourth Ripper victim, you know, she was one of 12 children. She was sold into service, so she didn't really have much of a chance anyway. That she walked when she move to London. She walked. They basically she was born in Wolverhampton, which is in the middle of the country. Like, went to live in Bermondsey with mum and dad. They passed away. She went back to Wolverhampton and then walked from Wolverhampton to London to find some work. Invariably, she didn't. You know, Martha Tabram, who's, I always get asked, was she a possible victim? Because she's not part of the canonical five. You know, Martha Tabram, again, fell on hard times. Annie Chapman, you know, is known to live with an older man. So an older man would just pay for her time, if you like. And, you know, you just look at just how they lived. Mary Kelly, the fifth victim, she had a boyfriend, you know, and they split up, but he used to pay her rent, you know, and she I don't know, it's not documented whether she sold the body before they split up, or we definitely know that she did afterwards. But, you know, it's like, what do you do? This is all there is for you down there, you know. And I must admit, if you ever come over, I can walk you through these streets and you'll be surprised. So a lot of it's gone, a lot of it's still there. but the parts that are there you'll be sort of, wow, you know, bring you straight into 1888. Yeah.
Oh.
It's amazing.
Such history.
Now, you mentioned the shawl,
Yeah.
and we got goosebumps earlier because he has the shawl with him today.
I'm actually crying.
Yeah. Is there
Well,
any way you can give us a peek?
I can, yeah. But let me just tell you, I wouldn't be sitting here today if I didn't buy that shawl, because again, when I did the research myself, when I went to the archives in Kew, any of us can go in there and do our own research. And I was looking for something that somebody missed, but there isn't. It's been gone over so many times that the case is sort of a mystery in itself, a mystery wrapped up in an enigma. So it wasn't until 7 years after, so 2007, my mum called me and said, it was all over the news in the UK's and newspapers, that a shawl was for sale that was taken from the fourth murder scene of Jack the Ripper, which is Catherine Eddowes, on the night, obviously, when the body was discovered, by an acting sergeant, Amos Simpson. Now, in the book, you know, what that book did as well is highlighted what I needed to fill in the gaps for the second book, which is written now. And Amos Simpson was an acting sergeant, unbelievably. He was made acting sergeant in a town just up the road from where I lived when I went down to live outside of London. And with that, there were 3 other acting sergeants on patrol on that night. And they weren't on patrol for Jack the Ripper. They were on patrol for what's called Fenian interests. So this whole other story, on the side about the Irish protesting and, you know, trying to, well, they blew up Scotland Yard a few years before, and they found the explosives in one of the houses in Mitre Square, which is the fourth murder scene. So, and that's quite close to the docks. So they were on Fenian duties. And there's a great book called Fenian Fire, and all along this Ripper story, there's another story that's not really ever told, and all the detectives, they're all in this Irish case as well. So it seems like this main Irish case, and then there's this 10-week blip of Jack the Ripper in this story. So we located that, you know, that Amos Simpson was there at the time, and through that he passed it down to his great grandnephew. He looked to sell it. He donated a lot of money to charity. David Melville Hayes, his name is, and I bought it. Now I bought it because the pattern on the shawl is Michaelmas daisies. Well, Michaelmas daisies are little flowers come in September, but Michaelmas, which is why I bought it, really put the link to me. Michaelmas is an Eastern Orthodox Christian celebration and Western Christian celebration celebrated on 2 specific days of the year. That's the 29th of September and the 8th of November. And lo and behold, they're the 2 nights he went out and murdered 3 of his 5 victims. So I had a very valid reason why Jack the Ripper, the man they called Jack the Ripper, went out and murdered 3 of his 5 victims. So when I called Scotland Yard to tell them, because it was held at Scotland Yard through the 90s, they told me who Jack the Ripper was, and here we are today. So what I've got for you is something I've never shown anybody. It's actually always in a bank vault. I'm doing something very unique with it this week. So I'll just show you. It's always been kept in this cardboard. This is how it was purchased. And inside it's always kept. So I've been criticised by holding the shawl by my hand, but my DNA has been tested. So my DNA is on here, and we can eliminate my DNA from contamination anyway. But it's always held in 2 sealed bags. Very unique thing, this, guys. You're going to see something very bizarre. I'm so used to it, you see. So
Here we go again.
14 years next month. So here we have the 2 pieces. So there was a piece that when Amos Simpson asked if he could take it, and they allowed him. He took it back to his wife because it's a huge piece of silk, which I'm just about to show you, and it's covered in blood. And his wife freaked out, and he cut that part out. So there's 2 pieces. So the piece that's that there was completely soaked in blood's gone, which is quite eerie in itself. And I've got the other two pieces. So that's just the tip of one.
Sorry, guys, we froze up here just a second. Jeremy's working on it, I know.
I'm
Give
completely
us
blind here.
just 1 minute. Oh, this is so frustrating. We all froze. Jeremy, are you there? Can you hear me? Guys, we froze up here just a second. Jeremy's working on it, I know. You need to shut that off. Give us just 1 minute. I don't even know if Jeremy knows he's frozen. Okay, there he goes. He'll be right back, guys. So sorry about this. He'll be right back. I know, never fails, Stephen. This is the 13th dimension. If something didn't go wrong, everything would be right with the world. And we wouldn't be us if something didn't happen. I don't know. Jeremy, did you pay your internet bill? Where'd he go? He like completely left.
He might have had to relog. Let me hit Emily real quick and let her know we're going to be running about 15 minutes late tonight.
Yeah, we're running just slightly over. We're sorry, guys. Once again, we are terribly sorry that this happened. Okay, I see Jeremy's back. Let's see if he can load us right back up where we were. Going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
This isn't amazing. This is epic.
Yeah.
Just shortly before she was murdered. Ancient DNA work, not regular. They told me who Jack the Ripper was, and here we are today. So what I've got for you is something I've never shown anybody. It's actually always in a bank vault. I'm doing something very unique with it. It's red and they're like a complete bacteria-free room. I think that was a bit over the top. But the genius of the professor that did the DNA work, and it's ancient DNA work, not regular DNA work. His name's Dr. Jari Louhelainen, and he's very cool in his approach. He pioneered the scientific technique that managed to get not just the DNA from there, but uncontaminated DNA, not from the surface, so it's not swab technique, which is usual DNA practice, but a vacuuming technique. And as you'll see now, this is the actual shawl, guys, so I'll just announce it. He managed to get the DNA embedded in the weave of this shawl. It's only about 2-3 millimeters thick. So this has never been shown live on TV ever. So if I pull it back, I'll give you an idea of how big it is.
I'm shaking.
Wow.
Wow.
So this has gone.
It's really quite lovely too.
It is.
Yeah. Which is how I pieced together it wasn't owned by the victim, it was the murderer. It's fragile now, so there's lots of scrolls of aging in it. But what really did it for us was, I don't know if you can see this, just
Oh, wow.
But the whole, so when I bought the shawl, it took me a few years to meet Dr. Jari Louhelainen, and we met through a documentary. And we knew it wasn't him, but I knew I'd get to see an ancient DNA specialist. And when he analysed the shawl, the first thing he said was, "This obviously it's very old. It smells very old as well." I'll just show you the first thing. I don't know if you can see this. I'll hold it to the camera for you. It's best I can. It's more blood there. Can you see all those white dots?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Can you see all of it right across?
Yep.
Yep.
That's arterial blood spatter that's consistent with slashing. And of those Dexter fans, there's three. There's bludgeoning, like a hammer type, that's the blood spatter one, gunshot and slash. This blood spatter on here is consistent with slashing. And we know that this was taken from the fourth murder scene where Aaron Kosminski, the Ripper, he cut Catherine Eddowes' throat, and he took the kidney and he took the uterus. So we found the kidney cell, and we got her DNA from this, that there. That's actually where he placed the kidney there. So we had that, and then the reason how we come to name Jack the Ripper conclusively was the fact that there's only one ejaculate on the shore. Now, the odd thing of the years I've done the shores and the tours I've done and the conversations I've done, that I never thought I'd be talking about Jack the Ripper's semen, if you can imagine. But because he didn't get on this, we managed to, Yori, with again, is superb scientific analysis. I don't know if I can show you, if I can get this on camera. Can you see that there?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's actually semen.
Oh, my Lord.
And from that, we had a sperm head analyst called David Miller, Dr. David Miller, and Yari extracting the DNA so professionally and so precise. That's how we named Jack the Ripper. Because what we did was we did a lot of work. We've done a lot of work on the shore, so we dated it. So it's pre-1854. And we know that it came from Eastern Europe, so not the East End. We know it's valuable silk, which Catherine Eddowes, the day before her murder, they had to pawn, her and her partner, Kelly, and they had to pawn his own boots so they could get a night's doss, if you like. And she even had to go and sell her body because she was drunk on the Thursday. On the day that when she was arrested, just shortly before she was murdered. So this is a very expensive piece of silk that somebody, a street prostitute, would have never owned. And
Right.
That's how we pieced that this came from him. So he took it to the murder scene. Because originally when I bought the shawl, it was the Eddowes shawl, and I thought it was Catherine Eddowes' shawl, as everyone would. It was through the detective work that I did that took me years to make me realise it wasn't her shawl at all. So if it was found directly at the murder scene, there's only one other person that would have left that there, and that was him. The big question I've been asked many, many times, so why would he leave an expensive piece of silk, the silk shawl at this murder scene? Well, I've already given the answer, because the Michaelmas connection, when he leaves the shawl on the night of the 29th of September, 1888, he let the world know the date of his next murder, which was the 8th of November. And that's when he went out and murdered Mary Kelly 5 weeks later. And I was the only guy, this baldy guy sitting in front of you, I was the guy that put that together.
Wow.
So there you go.
We are absolutely amazed.
There's your Michaelmas babies, guys, by the way.
And that pattern is so gorgeous. It really is.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
It showed lots of signs of dating now. It is, if I hold it up to light, you can see through quite a lot of this segment. Yari tells me off because it needs to be preserved out of light. There's even light can damage it now. But that's it folded in half that you can see. That's a beautiful piece of silk.
oh man, it is so gorgeous.
It really is.
This piece of material here, this one thing I'm holding here, is the only evidence left that exists. And thankfully for me, it had the blood on there from the victim that had been matched with a direct female descendant through mitochondrial DNA. And of course, the semen, because you would have known, they would leave DNA that would incriminate him over 130 years later. But that's the shore, guys. I've never shown that to anybody that I've ever on camera.
Well, we are more than honored.
Dude, I mean,
to-
I'm absolutely astounded.
to
And
see that. And thank you so much for letting us see that, because
Can you see how small you can fit that in your pocket?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was always significant.
amazing.
I mean, that
It's
is just,
absolutely- and in your book you talk about the murderer being of Polish descent and immigrant to the East End as well.
Yeah,
And I have actual family links to Poland around that 1920s. My family immigrated here, early 1920s. Part of my family, I should say, immigrated here to the United States. So I found a connection with that when I was reading it in your book.
oh wow, yeah.
But I do know about the Orthodox tradition and the celebration of Michaelmas. So I did know that already, and then it made a connection with me on that personally. So I wanted to. One of the things that has really amazed me in reading your book is the amount of research that you had to do.
yep. Yes.
And I want you to explain to our viewers how long this process took, how much research and dedication it took to pull this off.
Well, when I did the archives at Kew, I was quite lucky because being a businessman, you know, I had enough time, personal time, to set aside to focus on this. So the one thing I did when I did the desk research, the primary research at the archives, was pull out all the stuff that in books, you know, when we read books, it's somebody's impression or somebody's interpretation or somebody's version of a story, no matter what it is. It's not the story, if you like. So it was getting the feel for the story itself, and there's lots of stuff in there. So I found a statement saying the police thought it wasn't the work of one man, which never been mentioned. The fact that Catherine Eddowes said to somebody in a pub a few weeks before that she'd met somebody that didn't want her to be working on the streets, and they offered her 5 shillings so she'd stay off the streets till this all blew over. Little things like this, you know. But that was sort of where I left it, knowing that without any evidence, you're never going to name the man, and I had a life to live. But then when I put the link of Michaelmas together with the murder dates in Scotland Yard, I literally called them and said, you know, I've got something quite unique. I know why that shawl was left there. I know the link between the shawl and the murder dates. And the curator of the Black Museum Scotland Yard said to me, you know what, Russ, this is the first piece of information I've heard in decades. It's brand new. That's what he said to me. And he said, you know what, I don't even know why they write these books, do these documentaries. Scotland Yard have always known who Jack the Ripper was. And he just said to me, it was Aaron Kosminski. Just said to me, just like that. And then he said to me, I said, well, obviously, when I fell off my chair and got back up again, I said, could you tell me the story behind that? He said, well, no, I'll let you go and do that. But I'll help you along the way if you're on the right track. But please don't waste my time with lots and lots of questions. So that's where I realized, you know what, I'm going to take this very, very seriously. So I sold my businesses. We had a recession, I'm sure you know, back in 2007. And in 2006, I had, in the 2000s, I'd sold my shares in the software company, finished with all of that, bought several care homes. I had 155 staff, so it was very, very busy running care homes. So I sold those knowing that basically the property.
Oh, I think we have a connection issue. Are you still there, Russell?
Oh, no. It seems we've lost Russell for a few, so.
Yep, hang on. Please don't go anywhere. We're gonna try to get him back here as quick as we can.
And while you do that, I'm going to run and grab a piece of toilet paper because somebody was crying like a little baby again.
So we've lost Russell just momentarily. He'll be right back, hopefully. So, but I'm telling you, people, if you have not seen this, or if you have not read it, please check it out. Go out and buy this book. It is well worth the read. Like I said, all three of us have read it. We all have sat in awe reading it. I will tell you this, he displays a great deal of humility in this book, and really he brings it all together. I'm hoping he can get back in with us here.
Wow, guys, that's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, to even see the Shaw, what we all have to remember is this is the only remaining piece of Ripper evidence in the world. This one piece is all that's left. And I'm really hoping, because I have so many more questions for him, I'm really, really hoping he can pop back in and explain how Aaron Kosminski was Jack the Ripper. Because the story of how he came about it, the story of how he was able to not only come to this conclusion, but in my opinion, my personal opinion, is dead on, is amazing. I'm going to try to contact him again here.
All right.
I am.
Happy early birthday, Scott.
Yeah, I know, right? If I can get to. And what I think another astounding thing is, yeah, I'm trying to get back in being a little guy. Not only is it the last remaining piece of evidence from Jack the Ripper,
My turn.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
Oh, add him in real quick.
but it was a piece of evidence from the
There he is.
victim. We lost you.
I don't know what happened there. That happened quite a bit, tell you.
No,
Yeah.
you're good. Good.
So you were saying about the research, and once I knew that the name that was given to me of Aaron Kosminski from Scotland Yard, it was a case of finding out everything I could about him. And again, you know, it's one thing going on Google and Wikipedia and all this, which is, again, somebody writes that. So it's not ironclad that that's actually 100%. Definitely on me, the stuff in there isn't as adequate as it should be. And I'm waiting to change that, but I can't just yet. But really, you know, all the answers lie in primary research, going through the archives, and quite luckily for me, London, you know, I live on the very northern tip of London, so I had access to all of this information, which is what I did. But what I also did at the same time is I explored every area of this story. So I used to come across names of suspects and quite easily eliminate. Even last year, you know, going through the asylum records and trying to find a photograph of Kosminski, because we've got a revelation on this one, that as well. I found one of the suspects in there, and he was sent to the same asylum as Kosminski, but was released. And it's things when you so going back to even all of the common names of people like Walter Sickert, Prince Albert Victor, George Chapman, just to name a couple. What was it? Robert Donston, the Queen's physician. You know, all of these people you can eliminate once you says, well, could it be him? No, because again, I wouldn't have said it was Aaron Kosminski if it wasn't for Scotland Yard saying it was Aaron Kosminski. And we've got to remember that Kosminski was named not only in the McNaught Memorandum, which I've got a copy of right here, but the two guys, Robert Henderson and Donald Swanson, who were in charge of the case, who actually saw every document through their hands especially Donald Swanson, named Kosminski as the suspect. And this is the thing: he was actually named by the guys that were in charge of the case, and yet people still go, "No, it wasn't him." So
That was another question I had for you, is how you react to the people who still, after hearing your evidence, still don't believe that it could have been Kosminski.
I think it's because they like to keep it a myth. I mentioned this in an interview I gave the other day. A lot of people take ownership of this. This story isn't mine. My story is, but the Ripper story isn't my story. And there's a lot of people that have the, I wouldn't say arrogance, just the ignorance, if you like, that they own this story. They know more about this story than the others. And I would put those people as what we term in the UK as anoraks, you know, like the nth degree of fact. Well, you've got all the facts. I've told you know, you can go to anybody can go and analyze the facts, but without any evidence, you can say, you know, there's about 300 suspects, or there's definitely 161 suspects, and they're not named suspects. They're just pulled out of the air. You know, James Maybrick's another one. I live near to the cemetery where he's buried, and that's because of a diary that's not even in his handwriting. Then it's got to be his brother. That's another one. You think, no. There's so many suspects that are just spurious and just all circumstantial, and only put together by people that have a vested interest in saying, I've solved the Jack the Ripper case. Well, they haven't got any evidence, so put it together like that, then Sherlock. There was a lady over your side of the water that tried that did a lot of DNA work originally, who got the DNA from a stamp, and Walter Sickert was the named artist. But again, there's lots of facts that are overlooked. So the DNA from the stamp was actually from a woman. That was overlooked. The fact that Walter Sickert was in Paris, so he's in France at the time of the murder, so he managed to get a train, or then get a boat, then get a train, and then went back the next. You know, he wasn't even in the UK at the time, but she still says, "This is the guy." You know, all a person could ever do with doing a stamp is saying that he wrote a Ripper letter, which is a big deal, which is so what type of thing, because so many Ripper letters were written, all not taken seriously, except for one, which is the From Hell letter, which was the part of the kidney sent to George Lusk on the 16th of October. So with these facts, obviously now I know the case inside and out, it's the people that make this story what it is, when actually it's a simple case of there was a lunatic, there was a maniac suffering with schizophrenia living in East End, and he took that out and had his way with these victims that were very easily accessible in the East End. And then this myth was created over a century, 130 years, 140 years almost. And yet no one will want to name who or say who he really was, because they like the myth behind the legend.
I agree with you on that. And like we talked about earlier, the Jack the Ripper industry in London, just in tourism alone, is millions of dollars a year. Yeah. People make these documentaries. They're making money off of it. They're making their name off of it. They're selling books off of it. So the truth of it is, you actually are the first person, I think, in history that took real evidence, combined it with modern day scientific knowledge, and came to a plausible and realistic conclusion.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
I mean,
and I want to say this the right way. You did it for the right reasons, because you wanted to find closure for these victims.
Yep.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But now, did you ever think that the shawl was the missing piece to this huge puzzle, this unsolved case for so long? Did you ever thought, this is it, this is what's going to help me?
You know, that's a great question. I've actually not been asked that one before, but what it was I knew once that Dr. Jari Lokalainen had analysed the very first day on the shawl, when he said there's arterial blood spatter in the form of slashing, when he said there's evidence of split body parts that could never be, he said you have to be a world expert to forge these. So that blood piece, you know, that I showed you on the shawl, you can't forge that. Just those two bits, because again, when we first looked at the shawl, we thought the semen we thought it was Catherine Eddowes' shawl, and we thought the semen was deposited by a punter or a customer. So initially we didn't take any notice of that really, but we knew there was semen on the shawl. I just knew that there was a good possibility, if the science would work and I did my work held it truthfully, then there was a good possibility we would get somewhere. So I can tell you the journey, it's not so much now, but that journey of discovery was one that will, for the rest of my life, it's a very 1 in a million, 1 in a bazillion, experiences that not many people have, but I knew that I was onto something, but I didn't know what.
When I first read this book, one of my first thoughts was, I need to borrow this guy's lucky horseshoe.
I wish I had it now.
Because I was like, for him to get this shawl, first off, I want to say to my viewers, when you first bought the shawl, there was no proof technically that it had Catherine Eddowes' blood on it.
No, it just had blood on it, and I thought, well, it's a bit freaky that someone would. It's old, it was old when I went and bought it, but the fact is, it was freaky that there was blood on it. Who would forge something like that, to make what, it didn't. But I just thought it's worth a punt. I had enough money at the time, and again, I had the link with the shawl to the murder dates, and again, I was given the name before I even bought the shawl, so that's why I bought it, because it could be. Not definite, but could be.
Yes.
And he almost didn't even buy the shawl.
Yeah.
That's right. That was I tell you what, it was the 7th. It's coming up next month. It's the anniversary. So on the day, there was when I went there, there's a huge, very prestigious auctioneers in Suffolk, and I only lived up the road at the time. And it was packed, and I thought everybody. I'd never been to something like that big before. And what it was there was one of the chief names who I really value his research was there, and I spoke to him. And there was another guy there who had a lot of connection with the shop, with the previous owner, and it was this thing of not knowing that absolutely everybody was there just for the show. And again, I stood on the shoulder just behind this game. I do value this individual as a researcher because we've got the same agent. Yeah. But I thought he was going to wait for the last minute and he was going to bid. So it was like loads of telephone buyers, and they were all on the phone, and it went really, really quickly. It's sort of like in a flash. But the guy that I thought was going to buy it, because I would have outbid him. I was, well funded enough to outbid him at the time. He didn't even raise his hand. He didn't, and it was like he didn't bid. And that one moment of that sort of, oh my God, I might have got this wrong, and that self-doubt. And I didn't buy it on the day. So I literally went home and I was like, what have I done? And I was, the English phrase is gutted. I was absolutely devastated that I'd let myself down. So on the Monday, I didn't sleep on the Saturday night or the Sunday night. And on the Monday, I called the auctioneers because they knew, I had I was interested. And I remember him looking at me on the day, and he's going, "Are you going to buy it then?" And I was like, "I don't want it." And I said, "Is it still available?" He said, "Well, if you pay the reserve, and our commission, you can have it." And I said, "All I wanted, which I've got here, obviously, is a letter of provenance from the owner, and it's done in old typewriter, the letter. I'll go and buy it." And that's what I did. So thank God.
Yeah. I mean,
oh man,
just think.
You'd have missed the chance of a lifetime had you passed.
And not only that, I think whoever might have bought it, there's a good chance they may have missed. They may not have made the connections that you made.
Right.
Yeah.
This story could have gone completely untold and lost to history.
Yeah.
Had you not been able to buy the shawl and had the dedication and the perseverance to see it through to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fate. It was fate that brought, Russell to the Shaw. I mean, it is absolute fate.
And
You know,
one of the things I loved in this book was that you how you stated, my mind kind of works differently. I kind of think
Yeah.
outside the box. I think different things. The way you analyze the textiles and had the pattern itself, the way you were able to trace that back to its origins.
Yeah,
And the
Yeah,
Shaw is
again.
actually much older than the Jack the Ripper story.
yeah. Well, we had to make sure it wasn't a modern day forgery, even though it's clearly old. What we did was, I'm sort of that type of person that you put the foot in the door. I need an answer. I'm not going to move my foot from the door till you give me an answer. So I went to the Spitalfield Society, the Huguenot Society, because I thought it was Spitalfield silk. Because in the 18th century, those houses, that the slum doss houses, were silk weaving houses by the French Huguenots. So I thought it was one of them. And then I found out that the Huguenot silk industry had finished decades way before the Ripper story. So then all of a sudden, where's it come from? So I went to Christie's, it was prestigious auctioneers in the UK, and then Sotheby's is another one. So the two textile experts there. And I found this lady over in Switzerland. And again, it was just a lot of research. Again, just, in that sort of, not tunnel vision, but in a way where any distractions got to be away from you to do this. And as a writer now, I can thankfully go there now quite easy. But back then it was very, very difficult. And then they all said, this is not this wasn't made in England. This is from Eastern Europe. This is Eastern Europe. And then what really, really nailed this and solidified this for me, when we got the match, the 100% DNA match with the blood on the shawl, with a direct female descendant of the fourth murder victim, I thought, that's all I need to do. That's my story done. My agent said to me, you're going to have to go further because people will criticize you. I wasn't expecting what happened to me at the time when I did reveal it. So what we did was called mass spectrometry. And again, that was through a great scientist called Dr. Faiz Ismail. What they do is so Yari says to me, I've got this guy with 1 square centimeter of any material. He could tell you where and when it was made anywhere in the world. So the only time the shawl was cut in front of me, I've given some samples to the descendants and a very good friend of mine, but it was cut 1 centimeter square, and it felt like somebody had ripped my heart out. And Fayaz is a great teacher, and he told me all what was going to happen. Thankfully, it's all on camera. Whether you'll see the footage, I don't know. But he came back to me and he said, you know what, this is what really did it for me. He said, that shawl, even though I knew it was from Russia, Pavlovsky Posad, over in sort of northeast Russia. He said, this silk it's pure silk, so it's very expensive. So we knew that's why is a street prostitute living on the bones of a backside with something very expensive? That didn't make sense. The next thing, the blue section that I showed you with the Mercedes panel is water soluble. So if that got wet, all the dye would run. So it's a rudimentary dye. So it's all plant dye. So, and he says water soluble. And with that, we knew that it wouldn't, if you're having a shawl on, you're wearing it in the it's not very warm over in England in the winter. So, it would have been ruined, and it's not. It's in fabulous condition. And then he said the dye came from St. Petersburg in northern Russia. So it was the science, me with my research is one thing, but it's the science that led all of this. Dr. Yori Lokalainen, Dr. Faiz Ismail, Dr. David Miller, all names in their own right. They did this work, and because of their expertise, led me to go on to a stage further, So that's really how it happened.
It's amazing.
It is. I mean, especially with the science that we have today. And I mean,
yeah, the scientific advances of today, there's no way they could have figured all this out in the 1800s, in the 19th century. They just didn't have the means to do it.
No, there was we did when we brought the story out of the Shawl and who Jack the Ripper was. There was a camera crew that come up and filmed me, Fayaz, and Yari in the labs, and these were very skeptical cameramen. And I remember the day they were sitting there saying, "Ah, that's not Jack the Ripper," and all this. I said, "Okay, you know what? Let's just do this film and see what you think at the end of it." And when they actually finished the filming, the pair of them were just like, "Wow, I can't believe that!" You know, they were just so blown away. They were like, "Oh my god, this is it! He's done this!" You know. But it's brilliant from turning somebody's opinion when they just haven't got a clue to, "Oh my god, these guys have really got this!" You know. So yeah, it was this type of thing. Thankfully, to modern day science, Yari and I have got a few tricks up our sleeve yet to reveal, which will really blow everybody away. I can't say it now, but when we do, you'll be definitely there to know about it.
Oh yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Please remember us. And we would love to bring you back on to talk about it as much as you'd like.
Absolutely, dude. Oh, absolutely.
It's something that everybody will want to see.
Now, I did have another question here, and I think it's important to the story because I think it's really going to show our viewers just how hard you had to work to get this. Can you explain the difference between mitochondrial DNA and nucleic DNA and how mitochondrial DNA played a part?
Yeah. So there's DNA, RNA, genomic DNA, and mitochondrial DNA. Now, mitochondrial DNA is more plentiful in a cell. Nucleic DNA, is basically in the nucleus of the cell, and it's male and female. To get what we needed, because obviously the DNA was female, the blood, is we needed the mitochondrial DNA because it's more, how do I put this, in the cytoplasm, it's more abundant. And from that, with nucleic DNA, it's male and female. With mitochondrial DNA, it's only female. So that means, and this was when Yari said to me, let me just say, when it's bringing it back to me tonight for some reason. When Yari said to me, "We've got cells, we can get DNA." So it's bizarre, but when he said we've got DNA, he said, "I've done the hard part." It took him a year, by the way, and it was the vacuuming technique that he pioneered for this work that got us to do this, which was without Yari, I wouldn't be here. Anyway, and he's doing very well with. We're still on other projects plus this one, but he's doing well in his own right now. But he said to me, "You're going to have to find me a direct female descendant of Catherine Eddowes, the fourth Ripper victim." So that means I've got to go and find a needle in a haystack in a field full of haystacks. That's how hard it was. I lived in Cambridge at the time. So I don't know if you know, there's a library in Cambridge with nearly every single book that's ever published in history, every single book ever made, you can go to. So I went and got somebody did some research on a family tree. It didn't go to the direct female descendants. So it was, do you know what? It's one of these things, again, in this journey that I was on, that you hit a brick wall and then you've got to learn the discipline to sit back and breathe. Because sooner or later you start realizing something else will come up. And what happened was I thought I'd never find this person. And lo and behold, there was a documentary called Jack the Ripper Find My Past. And there, as I'm sitting there watching the telly, and it's on YouTube if you want to see it, Karen, her name is a direct female descendant of Jack the Ripper's fourth murder victim. So it was literally just by pure luck. You know, I'd done as much research as I could, but couldn't find them. And there on the telly right in front of me is the woman. So then it was a case of how do I get hold of her, and remembering that she's a descendant of a victim down the female line. So significantly, guys, what it is, if Catherine Eddowes' daughter, who's called Annie Phillips, had then had another daughter, and then that daughter had a son, or Annie Phillips had a son and no daughters, we couldn't do the DNA work. It had to be through a daughter. That's the only way we could do it. So anyway, yeah, so that was pure luck. So with this,
There's your lucky horseshoe again.
yeah, that was very much, yeah. You know what? I recommend it. It's a very good story, Jack the Ripper. Anyway, I thought, well, you know what? You've got to be. If I'm going to call Karen and say, guess what? I'm this scouser who's a person from Merseyside or a Liverpool, and I've got the shawl, and I want your DNA to match it up because of this. She might have just slammed the phone down, or said, "This guy's a nutter," and don't even speak to me ever again. So I had to carefully prepare what I said, which I did, and thankfully Karen's a really, I know we'll be friends for the rest of our lives, but she's a lovely lady, very understanding. What she said to me was, she said, if you can help me identify the murderer of Catherine, we always call her Catherine, it is Catherine Elizabeth, but it was Catherine, or Kate, she's known as Kate, but it's Catherine. I'll give you any help at once. And she gave me DNA. Yori'd obviously sent me a whole load of DNA swabs, which I've still got a bag of the spares in all my research. Yeah, so as I say, I've kept documented everything on this. And then those little moments I'll give you. So like the banker's draft, taking it from the bank to the auction house to buy the shawl, I'm holding that, taking the shawl, holding it, taking the taking the DNA swabs, sending them to Karen. She didn't come back to me for 2 weeks, and I panicked, and she'd gone on holiday. So you're not going to do this to me, please don't do this to me, And then she sent it back to me with a letter, which I've still got everything I've got. Though one day somebody will pay attention, I'm sure. And then me being me, Yori's 4 hours away, so I drive up to Yori, give him the samples, and I'm expecting Yori to come back the next day in my impatient mode, as I used to be, and give me an answer. It took 6 months of work, 6 months from the day I gave him the DNA of the direct female descendants to the results. And on that day, again, Yori's a very unique scientist, to say the least. He said, Russ, you're going to have to drive to Liverpool. I've got something to show you. I said, can you just tell me over the phone? He said, no, I can't do that, because we filmed it as well. Obviously, my first reaction. So you can imagine that, like, it's 4 hours. It's not. It's like, it's not round the corner. I'll be with you in 10 minutes. It's 4 hours driving them. You can imagine that thrill of just doing that journey. So anyway, I get there, and I remember I was wearing a pink shirt, a pair of jeans, and I'll never forget my face when as pink as the shirt. And he sat me on this stool in front of a bench, in front of a computer, and he just pressed the button. I said, what's that? He said, that there, Russ, is a direct DNA match between the blood we've managed to get uncontaminated from the shawl and the direct female descendants of Catherine Eddowes. And those special moments, I felt like I was working on air.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. I can imagine driving and your heart just pounding out of your chest.
Yeah, just the anticipation.
Yeah.
He does that a lot. He used to do that a lot to me, not because he's a handsome fella, but because of these type of things. But then we realised that's when we did the mass spectrometry and identified the semen was the killers, not So again, that same process. So we had to do sperm head analysis, where Dr. David Miller comes in. It's a very specialist job he had to do, and it was one freezing cold night in London, and I was driving, and Yori called me and said, "You know what, Russ? We've got he's managed to get 18 cells from the semen sample that he took from the shore, and he says we can get DNA." And I'm like, "Yes!" And he said, "Not really, Russ, because a pinhead would cover 200,000 cells. We've got 18.
Yeah.
That's all we had." And we were like, "Oh my God." So it's like, well, what do we do? And of course, I used to have an afro before I started. Yeah, fell out. So what happened was, he said, well, what we do is like we copy them, and overnight you can create over 1 million cells, which is what he did. And then we had more enough for the samples. And again, that journey was on. And again, I had to find, of course, we couldn't dig Catherine Eddowes up because we know that she was murdered and we wouldn't be allowed by UK law. But with Jack the Ripper, we know it's Aaron Kosminski. Could we dig up Aaron Kosminski? you know, and so this was around, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was the 12th of December 2012, and I knew where he was buried. So I called the guy that runs the United Synagogue and asked for his permission to exhume Aaron Kosminski. So you can imagine a guy calling out the blue saying, you know, telling them my story I've just told you, and say we'd like to exhume Aaron Kosminski because you can get the DNA from a tooth even at that age. So just DNA swab inside the tooth, you've got his DNA. And of course, when I told the guy who I spoke to get the permission, he said, just give me a few days. He says, this is an amazing story. Can just give me a few days. And I remember they came back with a definitive no chance. You'll never dig him up. So I was completely devastated because I thought, well,
Right.
where are we going to go? But my discipline, like I told you, was just hold back. You know, something will present itself, and it always has. You know, so the first week in January, went to see Yari. I'm sitting there. I had a rubbish Christmas. It was like this all the time. Yari said to me, "Did Aaron Kosminski have a sister?" And I said, "Yeah." He had two brothers, Wolfgang and Isaac, and he had a sister called Matilda, and her name's Matilda Lubnowski Cohen. He said, "You know what? Did she have any kids?" I said, "Yeah, she had 10 kids." He said, "Well, if you can find me a direct female descendant from her, I can do the work that way." You know, so really, yeah. So okay, so that was in the first week in January, 2013, and I didn't find. This is how hard you say about the research and dedication. I didn't find it till October, but it took me from January to October to find.
Wow.
You know, but living in that bubble, you know, of just discovery. Yeah, it's quite a trippy, unique. It's a like a bit like a high. You know, you get knocked down so many times in life, and I'm sure all of us do. You just stand up again and start again, which is, you know, when I said I was successful as a businessman when I was a kid, and I was homeless, and then I managed to, within a few years, at the third largest software company in the country. You know, it was that type of get up, not life knocks you down, stand up. You know, so that's what sort of disciplined me to know that just keep going. Anyway, I found her and went to see her. Lovely lady. I had to sign a document that I can't disclose any information about the Kosminski family. They don't want to be publicised whatsoever. I'm in touch with a few other relatives now, and again, that they're happy to talk, but not on. They would never want to be seen.
Right.
Anyway, she said to me, she said, "Okay, well," and she was what I say when the story I'm telling you now is what I said on the tour. She was very anti. You know, well, what if what if the shore was there by the dead body and Aaron Kosminski walked past? I said, well, okay, so give yourself a perspective here. There's a window of 8 minutes between the Caffeinator seen alive and discovered murdered, and Aaron Kosminski just happens to walk through that Mitre Square. He looks on the shore and decides to masturbate over the shore and dead body. So that ruled that out, and that he could have been a customer. Okay, well then, if he was a customer, how did that shawl get there? Because it certainly wasn't in Caffeinator's possession whatsoever. So the murderer was the only person that took that shawl there. So she had, the obvious questions, So then she said, yeah, okay. And she gave me a sample of the DNA, and that was in the October. And then you've got this, again, that feeling. And I've got to drive to Liverpool again, holding this file of DNA, obviously all sealed up and stuff. And Yari just says, thank you very much. And again, I'm waiting for the answer the next day. Anyway, the descendant we were very, very good friends at the time, and every day we're talking about the case, and I know we're going to talk about the kidney cells shortly. So all of these things until it was the third Friday in February. Hang on, where are we now? It's Saturday, isn't it? It's next Friday. So it's about now. Okay, so it's literally now. I think it was, I think it was yesterday, the third or second Friday it was in February. So it's right now. What happened was, so sorry, I know this is recorded.
You're fine.
8. So I'd lost half a stone in the previous 2 weeks to this day, and I knew Yari was very close. And 8:30 on that Friday. So this is my life. I'm literally looking at my phone every 2 minutes for Yari to say to me, we've got something, we haven't got something. Because if we hadn't got something, I would have said to the world, this is as far as we could ever get with the evidence that we've got. But what Yori said, he says, go and check your inbox. And I get asked how much I paid for the show, which I'll never divulge. But what I do say is, how much did it cost me? Now, it's cost me millions now.
Oh,
but at the time, I'm literally, my heart is basically holding, it's that much at my chest. And as my computer was on my first floor office from a living room, and I'm darting up the stairs as quick as I can, and I realised two things. The From Hell film to that moment was 14 years of my life, and I'd spent £750,000 through that moment. So you can imagine, there was just that, I promise you this, when you're in a bubble of discovery and you think you're getting somewhere, it's very hard to get out of it. And so I press Yori's email, and it says something along the lines of, "Dear Russ, please see attached. Even I admit this is a work of genius." And Yori's a very humble person, so for him to say that, to do what he's done, you've taken 130-year-old DNA, collected it, sampled it, managed to get it to be workable, and managed to do something with that.